Hey guys, so in this video, I'm going to show you how to build a scraper that spies on your LinkedIn competition and then sends you an AI analysis of their posts automatically. So let me just demo how this works, and then we'll build it out step by step in N8N. So I'm just going to click on execute workflow, and then my automation is going to get to work. So what it's doing here is it's using Apify to scrape LinkedIn for Justin Welsh's post here, this creator over here. And now it's sending those posts to an AI model, Anthropic. We're using Claude 3.7 to provide an analysis of those posts. And then what it's going to do is it's going to send that analysis to a Google Sheet, and it's also going to send me an email in Gmail. So it's finishing up right now in Google Sheets. So you can see it's got the analysis right here in Google Sheets. And not only that, when I hop back into my Gmail, I can see I have that analysis emailed to me directly. So again, this is set to run once a week. So the idea being that this agent is going to spy on your LinkedIn competitors. It's going to analyze what they've been posting about, and then it's going to send you that report in Google Sheets and in Gmail automatically. And so this video is for folks who are pretty new to N8N. And what I've found is, listen, on YouTube, there's a lot of cool videos out there. They're crazy automations. They don't really have a lot of real world value. What I'm finding in my community is that people want to learn the basics of N8N. And so I'm going to be focusing on that in this video. You're going to learn how to set up a HTTP request with Apify so we can scrape LinkedIn. You're going to learn how to feed that into an AI model to do an analysis. And then you'll learn how to send that analysis to Gmail and Google Sheets. So if you're new to AI agents, you're new to AI automations, or you're new to N8N, you're in the right place. And by the way, if you are new to AI automations, definitely check out the free school community, AI Automation Made Easy. We've got over 500 members in there, and I've got a classroom here that includes all of my YouTube videos, and then under each video, I include the template, so you can just import it into N8N or Lindy or Gumloop. So if you want the template for this video, be sure to check out the free school community that's linked below. So let's just do a quick preview of the game plan, and then we'll build it out step by step in N8N. So we're using a schedule trigger here. So we can set this to run, let's say, once a week. You probably don't need to be scraping your competitors' LinkedIn posts every single day. So it's going to start with a schedule. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use Apify, and we'll get into this. And what Apify is it allows you to use a whole bunch of different scrapers, right? And so in this instance, we're using LinkedIn, but Apify has scrapers for TikTok, Instagram, Google Maps, Amazon, pretty much anything that you can think of. So we're going to be using this LinkedIn post scraper inside of N8N in order to scrape LinkedIn. And then we're going to just do a little bit of text manipulation right here with this aggregate node, which we'll get into. And then we're going to send those LinkedIn posts to an AI model here that's going to analyze the post based on our prompt. So we're using this basic LLM chain, and you can see I'm using Anthropic Claude 3.7 in this example. So again, this is really the brains of the operation that's going to perform the AI analysis on the LinkedIn content. And then finally, again, we're just going to send that analysis to a Google Sheet and to Gmail. So once a week, you'll have a sheet that updates with the day and the time and includes the analysis. And again, you'll also get an email report once a week with that analysis as well. Now, if you want to follow along step by step and build this out by yourself, which, by the way, is the best way to learn N8N, it's not just about importing templates. It's about learning the thought process behind the flow, actually clicking the buttons. So if you do want to follow along, what you'll need, number one, is just a simple Google Sheet. I just have two columns here. I've got date and I've got the analysis. And then the other thing you need is a free Apify account. So you can see I am on the free account right here in order to use some of these scrapers, at least to try them out. And then, of course, we're building this in N8N, so you need N8N as well. All right, so in N8N, let's start with a blank canvas here. Now, again, the first step, if we want to think through this logically, we don't need this to run every single day. If we want to kind of spy on our LinkedIn competitors, I think once a week makes sense. But we can do a schedule trigger in N8N. So let's click on Add First Step and search for Schedule Trigger. And here in N8N, you can set how often this runs, right? So this basically wakes up the automation and tells it to start going. So we can see the trigger interval is at days, and then the days between triggers, let's change that to 7 days. And then you can pick what hour you want to run this. Let's just do this at 9 a.m. All right, now if I click out of here, we can see that we have this schedule trigger ready to go. All right, so let's think through what's the next thing that we want to happen. When our automation wakes up, what do we want to do? So we want it to go out and actually scrape LinkedIn. Okay, so in order to do that, N8N does not have a native LinkedIn node, so we have to use a third party, which Apify is. So let's talk about Apify for a second. So once you're signed in and signed up to Apify, you're going to go to the Apify store where you're going to see a whole bunch of different scrapers. So again, we're looking for LinkedIn, but let me just search for LinkedIn. And there's so many here. I'm going to search for LinkedIn Post. And so the one that we want is this LinkedIn Post Scraper by Supreme Coder. So I want you to click into this. And now what we're going to do is we're going to configure this. It might look a little confusing at first. And listen, I'm not a coder. But once again, the more that you play around with these tools, the more comfortable you'll get. So the first thing that we're going to want to do in Apify with this actor is just configure the settings. So let's think about the source URLs. So in this example, I'm just going to scrape one person. And so what we need to provide here is the person on LinkedIn, their profile that we want to scrape. So in my example, I'm going to use Justin Welsh, who is one of my favorite creators. So I'm going to grab his LinkedIn profile URL. I'm going to go back to the source URLs. I'm going to remove Alex Hormozy, and I'll put Justin in there. All right. So now we're telling the scraper, hey, this is the person that we want to scrape. And now the next field here is the limit per source. So how many posts of Justin's do we want to scrape? So if it's a 1 week period, you can assume he's posting once a day. So for the purposes of this video, we'll just put in 7. But the point is, this is going to tell you, or it's going to tell Apify how many posts to bring back. So we'll set that at 7. Now, for scrape additional information and get raw data, I'm going to leave both of those on. We probably don't need them actually for this purpose, but I'm going to leave it just to show you the kind of information that it brings back. All right, now that we have our initial settings in Apify configured with the scraper, and look, that was pretty easy, we can go back into N8N. We're going to need to come back to Apify, but for right now, let's go back to N8N, and this will be the most technical part of this build here. But what we need to do is call this scraper, right? We need to send it a signal that says, hey, I want you to scrape Justin's profile and bring back 7 posts. So the way that we do that is we're going to use an HTTP request node. So let's click on plus. I'm going to search for HTTP requests, and this is a way to call this Apify scraper, right? It's going to send it a message and say, hey, I want this information. So the way that we do this is we need to fill in a couple of fields here. So the first thing is the method, right? So what request method do we need to use? So I want you to change this to post because, and actually I can show this to you. I'll explain why. So in the API setting inside of Apify, if you go down to API endpoints, and we're going to use this in just a second, but the endpoint that we're going to use is this one, and you can see it's telling us we need the post method, the post endpoint. So that's the reason that I'm going to choose post right here. All right, so what is the URL that we're calling, right? The URL that we're making the request to, that we're telling Apify, hey, I want you to run this for me. All right, so the way that you find that is, and I'll click out and show you again. So again, inside the LinkedIn scraper, where you were doing your settings, Apify makes this really easy. Click on the API dropdown, click on API endpoints, and I want you to scroll down to this third one, the run actor synchronously and get dataset items. Synchronously and get dataset items. So you can see there's a URL here, and it includes your API key automatically, and you can see it's blurred out. So what you want to do is just copy that value, come back to N8N, and then I'm going to post it in the URL field. So I want you to paste it in the URL field. All right, so you can see I've pasted mine here, right? So we've got the method as post, and we grabbed the URL from Apify. Now, we don't need authentication, and we don't need parameters, and we don't need headers, but we do need to send a body request. And again, this is actually pretty easy. So we're going to flick that button on. For body content type, we're going to leave JSON. For specify body, you're going to change this to using JSON, and I'll show you why in a second. All right, so you can see we have a box here that says JSON and it's empty, but we need to fill this box, and it's really easy to get this, right? So I want you to go back to your Apify scraper, and now in our settings, you might not have noticed, but we're in this manual configuration right here, but you can see there's a tab here called JSON, which matches what we see in N8N. So if you click into that JSON tab, you can see there's a tiny bit of JSON right here that you're going to want to copy and paste, right? So if you just highlight all of that, copy it to your clipboard, come back into N8N, and then right in here, paste that in, okay? And we're in fixed, yeah. All right, so we've got the JSON in there, and now this is actually ready to test out, and we should actually rename this. So we could just call this Apify, so we know what this node is doing. All right, so at this point, actually, it should be done. So let's try to execute this step. So it's always good, generally for every single step in Apify, maybe not the schedule trigger, but every other step, to test or execute the step to make sure it's actually working before you move on. So you can see right here that it did work, right? So we got 7 items, and yes, this is a jumbled mess, but what we can see here right away is this text field, okay? So this is the actual text of the LinkedIn post that we're going to want to grab later on. And you can change views here if it makes it easier to look at the data. So that was the JSON view. This is a table view, which is much easier to read. And it also shows you all of the fields that we're getting back, right? So remember earlier that I told you we don't need to click into get raw data, scrape additional information. The reason I checked that on is I wanted to show you the type of information that you can get back from this scraper, even though we're not going to use it in this build. So for example, you can get back the number of shares, the number of likes, and the number of comments on every post. So if you were to build on this automation and you wanted to use this data to help inform, what are the most popular posts of Justin, you could grab that information. So that's why I included it, just to show you the data that you can grab at a different point. But anyway, this is how you can view the data. I think table for this is probably the easiest, or maybe even schema. But anyway, now that we've tested this, we know this step is working. So it's not that hard to set up Apify. When I was first getting into this, and I'm, again, not a coder, I used to be afraid of using Apify. But when you break it down like this, we only need a URL and a little bit of JSON, and that's it. And we can run any scraper. It makes it really easy. All right, so we're ready to move on to the next step. But if you look at the output here, there is a ton of information in this output that, frankly, we don't need, right? Again, this is a simple build. We only want to analyze the text. So for the next step, what I want to do is kind of pull out or extract just this text right here. So let me click out of N8N. Let's add a new node, and I'm going to search for aggregate, which is to combine a field from many items into a list in a single item. So I want to aggregate just the text, okay? So for aggregate, we'll leave individual fields on, and what we want to do here is drag, and you can see I have my mouse over this text field here. What I'm going to do is just drag that right into this field. So let me just come over here, drag that in like that. Now, it doesn't really seem like anything is happening, so let's test this step and see what happens. All right, so that's great, right? So now what we're getting here is it basically cleaned out all that other information that Apify is pulling in, and it's just extracting just the text, which is exactly what we wanted, right? And you can see this in the output here. And again, we've got 7 posts, and you can see all 7 of them are right here, which is perfect. All right, now that we have the aggregate set going, what we need to add next is an LLM step, right? So we're going to have AI provide an analysis of Justin's LinkedIn post. So I'm going to click on the plus button, and I'm going to search for LLM Chain, right? And this is just basically ChatGPT or whatever model you want to use. So click on LLM Chain. And now what we need to do first is change this source for prompt. So it's defaulting to a chat, because most people use this LLM Chain node with a chat, right? You send it a chat like ChatGPT, but we're not doing that. So I want to change this to define below. And all that means is, what prompt do you want to provide the AI model here. And again, the one that I used in my video was very simple. So I'm going to just switch to expression. And then I'm going to click this arrow to make it a little bigger. And then I'm just going to look at the prompt that I used before so I could just copy and paste it. And it was this one, right? So again, obviously you can build out your prompt to be much more specific. If you want, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to keep it simple. Please analyze the LinkedIn posts below and provide a summary of its content. But now we need to pass in that content, right? We need to pass in the LinkedIn post. And we don't want to do it manually. Like, we're not going to cut and paste the actual text. What we want to do, and we're in expression mode, right, which accepts variables. I'm going to just grab this text kind of button or field here and just drag that in like that. And what you can see happen now, right, so this is the expression or the placeholder or the variable, and what it's pulling in is all of those 7 posts right here, kind of as one chunk, right? So the actual prompt it's going to receive is please analyze the LinkedIn post below and provide a summary of its content, and it's going to include all of that text. All right, so let's click back into the node itself, and I think actually this is ready to test as well. So let's click on execute step, and what we should see, nope, I forgot to give it the, I'll leave this in here so you guys don't forget. What we need to do is tell the LLM chain which model to use. So what you have to do is click out of here and you'll see it's still red because I haven't chosen a model. So you can choose Gemini, ChatGPT, Anthropic, whatever you have hooked up to N8N. Let's just use Anthropic for this one because I just hooked it up. I'm going to use Claude 3.7. If you haven't connected an account here, whether it's Anthropic or OpenAI or Google, you have to do it in these credentials to connect with, where you click on add new credential. And this is the Anthropic example, right? The only thing you need to do is add your API key, which you can get at your Anthropic account, save it, and then your credentials will be saved. But I've got mine selected. I chose the model, which is 3.7 Sonnet. So now when I click out here and hit save, we should be good to test this step. So I can actually just hit play on this and it should work as well. All right, so you can see that come in successfully. I can open up this node and here we go. So this is, and let's switch to table here. So here is the analysis, okay? So that's Anthropic, or that's Claude ingesting Justin's 7 LinkedIn posts and providing the analysis that we asked for. All right, so that's working perfectly. All right, now that we have the analysis, we just need to feed it to our outputs, right? So in my example, I'm doing an email and I'm also doing a Google Sheet update. So let's handle the Google Sheet first. So let's click the plus button here, search for Sheets or Google Sheets. And what we want to do here is append or update a row in a sheet. So click on that one. If you haven't connected your Google account, obviously you have to do that first. And then what we want to do here is choose the document. So mine is called the LinkedIn Creators. And actually, let me just clear this out. So I'm going to run it again fresh. So you want to pick the spreadsheet that you created. All right, so I've chosen LinkedIn Creators, and then we need to choose the sheet. In mine, there's only one sheet. So I've got sheet 1 chosen. Then our columns are going to populate. So what we need to do is fill in these 2 columns, right? So I've got the date and I've got the analysis. So if we think about this, we have the analysis already, right? Because it's coming from the previous step, which is the basic LLM chain. And it's this field right here, right? We can see the analysis is here. So what we want to drag in is this little text button right here in analysis. So let's drag that in like that. And when it turns green and you can kind of see it populate with the actual analysis, you know it's working. Now, for the date, there's kind of 2 options here. So if you're going to actually have this run on a trigger, you can pull in the date here, which is this readable date. And when you drag that in, it's going to populate and it's going to fill in your Google Sheet at the time that it ran. Now, I'm going to be executing this manually, so I actually don't know if that's going to work, but that's okay. I'll leave it in there, and if it doesn't work, I'll use the second option. But either way, if you plan on using this as a schedule, you can drag the date in here from the readable date. And now if I execute this step, let's see what happens. Yeah, so the comma match on is required. We got that error because I made a small mistake up here. So under operation, we actually want to change this to append row. Okay, not append or update, because we're not updating, we're just adding new rows. So make sure in operation, you select append row. And now let me try to test that now. All right, so let's go into Google Sheets. And actually the date and time did work. All right, so that was great. So we've got our date and we've got our analysis. All right, so this is the analysis from Claude coming right into Google Sheets. All right, the last thing that I'm gonna add here is that Gmail summary, okay? So I'm gonna do this from the LLM chain as well. And to add another node from here, just kind of hover your mouse over to the circle and just drag it out like that. And I'm going to search for Gmail. And what I'm going to do here is to send a message. So click on send a message. Again, you will need to connect your Gmail account if you haven't done that yet. Now for the to field, I'm going to actually hard code this in since this is going to myself and it's not a variable. It's going to me every time. Same thing with the subject. So you could provide the subject however you want to call it. So I'm just doing LinkedIn summary of Justin Welsh here. Email type, I'm actually going to change this just to text. And now the message is the important part, obviously. So again, we're just sending in the analysis itself. So it's the same thing as it was for Google Sheets. Grab this little text and drag it right into message. And we can see it's populating here perfectly. I think our Gmail looks good. And now let me execute this step and test it out. And then let me hop back into my Gmail. And then when I hop in, I can see 5:41, 0 minutes ago. Here is the analysis sent to me. This is the Claude analysis of Justin's posts. So that node is working as well. All right, now that we've tested this, if you actually want to run this once a week, just toggle this on to active and the workflow is activated. And now this will run once a week at, I think we did 9 a.m. It will scrape the LinkedIn posts. It will write it to Google Sheets and it'll give you the email summary. All right, so that's pretty much it. I think that's a pretty good example of a basic N8N automation that can be helpful. So do me a favor, if you enjoyed this video, like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment below. It really helps me out. And again, if you want access to this template, all of my templates, and a growing community of almost 550 AI automators, make sure to check out the free school community below. All right, guys, thanks.